So people think that, wow, we had this amazing conversation for 2 hours and this is beautiful. What they don't realize is that most viewers will begin to switch off after 20, 30 minutes.
Yes.
Yes. So long form content is becoming more and more popular, which initially felt very good. And there's a lot of us, when we want to listen to different subjects on things that we're interested in, it gives us an opportunity to actually listen in detail on that subject. But like all things, the yin and the yang, the black and the white, and the dark side and the bright side.
Yeah.
There's the positive side of long form content, and then there's the negative side.
Okay.
Now, on the positive side, one of the best things is it is natural. It can't be scripted, because if a long form content, it's almost guaranteed that nobody's reading off a script. So it's a natural conversation. So natural conversations are always better than, more or less, sometimes they're better than the scripted ones. Okay.
Or a conversation with AI.
Conversations with AI, yes. So long form content is on the positive side, it is natural. It's almost impossible to script it, and then it goes into a lot of detail on certain subjects that you would not find in a shorter conversation. Okay, now that is the bright side. On the negative side, one could argue that this is just a lazy way of doing things, because it takes time and effort to think about a subject, create a structure of it in your mind,
Yes.
and come up with a conversation which is precise and to the point. Because one of the main characteristics of, let's say, human intelligence, and which we also see now in the AI or artificial intelligence, is the ability to take a lot of information and then simplify it, come up with stuff which is really to the point and which makes sense. Mm-hmm. And that is exactly the kind of effort that is going on in the AI space as well. But coming on to the long form content, like I said, there are some advantages, but on the disadvantage side, the reality is that human beings, have always had a limited attention span. Yes. Now, although if there's something really interesting in terms of a very good movie, you could probably say you could watch it for a couple of hours or something. But with most things, the attention, a solid attention span is limited to, I would say, anywhere between 15 minutes to 30 minutes.
Yeah. I think
that is the maximum.
Yeah, I think there are several factors that are going into what keeps the interest of the viewer in the video or the.
Yeah.
And a couple of them from the top of my head is I think there are several factors that make it interesting for a viewer. One of them is that you're learning something new. Whenever you're learning something new, there's dopamine chemicals going on in your brain that are like, okay, now we're learning something new.
Yeah.
So it switches you on.
Correct.
And what you were saying about stories is very interesting, because in a story you're also learning something new about what is happening to the characters involved in that story, and how it unfolds. So you're curious to learn about what happens in the next scene, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So these are the several factors I think that can
you're absolutely right, and that's why there is a reason why with most videos you've got sections now, and you can move between when somebody's discussing subject A or an aspect of subject A, and it goes to B, C, and D.
It also matters to the like collaborations, famous people, the people that you want to really watch. It also like you have a longer attention span for it.
Yes, but coming back to the fact,
and a very powerful introduction.
Yeah.
Can also like hook up a viewer to watch the whole video. But it depends on how long it is and how
absolutely, because
it keeps on going.
That's the point. So even if you're watching your favorite person and the introduction was absolutely amazing, after like 20, 25 minutes, you're like, it begins to, you begin to, get distracted. And there's also a risk of, you switch it off. So under normal circumstances, you may have, if it was just a 20-minute conversation or a 30-minute conversation, you would have probably heard it end to end. But now that you can see it's a 3-hour or a 2-hour content,
No, I'm not watching.
you're like,
Instagram.
I'm done. So
you don't even click on it, I think.
yeah, it becomes counterproductive.
Yeah.
So people think that, wow, we had this amazing conversation for 2 hours, and this is beautiful. What they don't realize is that most viewers will begin to switch off after 20, 30 minutes. Yes. So that's the disadvantage. The other reason why people will go out for 2 or 3 hours, it's a psychological one. So when somebody's speaking, just like I'm speaking now, I will think that everybody else is very attentively listening. So you've got this extra adrenaline and you've got your thoughts going, and so the person who is speaking thinks that everybody is going to be listening to every word that he says very carefully, for a longer duration. And that is not always true, because after a while, if you're an excellent orator, fine, a few minutes here and there. But after that, people will begin to get distracted. So that is why the people who are actually participating in the conversation will think it's very interesting.
Especially if you're rapping like Eminem,
Yeah.
300 words per hour.
I don't know about that part, you're the expert there, but the thing is, so you could think, people who are in it will because they're exchanging ideas, and so they will have the interest going for 2-3 hours.
Yeah.
But the audience is going to begin getting distracted and begin switching off and begin getting tired of the subject.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Which is why we need to end this.
And absolutely, and also I think we've trained ourselves due to the introduction of shorts, and I think possibly 3 years ago, this started happening, that they introduced shorts and short content, short form videos.
And that's the other content.
That's I think that's something that has made our attention spans shorter as well, because I can remember myself when I was very young, I could read a book for hours and I didn't feel like it was boring or anything. So maybe all of these things have an impact on
you're
us.
absolutely right.
And I think it's what you were saying earlier is very important, that
Balance.
of course you need to strike a balance, but as soon as you realize that there's nothing interesting going on, you lose interest and you just...
You're absolutely right. Now, the short form content is the other extreme.
It's super consistent.
That is like they try to pack so much stuff, good or bad, in a very small, compressed, I don't know, like a minute to, 2 minutes, 3 minutes.
Yes.
And then, of course, then it ends up...
It's actually less than that sometimes.
It's less than that, and it ends up being a huge distraction. And I think it'll take a while before,
because it's taking you through such a wide range of emotions.
Yes.
In such a short span of time that you're not able to process all of that in a
yes,
book.
you think you're being able to process that information, but it is so unnatural.
Yeah.
So as you begin to scroll through different things, you may find something that is very interesting, something that is very frustrating, something that is very depressing.
Yeah.
And so this sudden level of highs and lows,
Yes.
I suspect, can get people eventually depressed, maybe.
Yeah.
Or eventually distracted.
Yeah.
Or eventually not being able to focus on stuff.
Yeah.
Or not being fulfilled on something.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And also I think there is what Abdullah was talking about, striking the balance, is that if you're consuming something, you have to also put something out.
Yes.
I think this is what you need to strike the balance in.
Yeah.
Allah.
And so that is why it is important that we make sure that this podcast of ours is not too long and it's not too short.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, so anything between, I guess, I don't know, 5 to 7 minutes on the shorter side and 20 to 25 minutes on the longer side, I suspect is, just in terms of guidance, obviously,
Yes.
is probably a good place, to make sure that, you fit your content in there.
Yeah,
Okay?
absolutely.